Hello and welcome to the CNBC TV 18 special, the Indo-French Dialogue. I'm Shereen, Bhan, and we're coming to you from the French embassy here in the capital. This program also assumes significance because it comes on the eve of Prime Minister Modi's visit to France as he gets ready to meet with the French president. Joining us today to discuss where areas of potential collaboration lie, what the opportunities and challenges are, and what the road ahead looks like is a bunch of very eminent panelists. Well, let me start by introducing you to our guests here. On my right, representing the Embassy of France, Jean-Marc Fenet, Minister Councillor, Head of Regional Economic Service, India and South Asia. Thank you very much for joining us here this morning. Representing NG, Malcolm Wrigley, Managing Director, with a special focus on investing in the renewable energy sector in India. Back with us again this year, Evelyn Collins from Societe Generale, the CEO. Joining us is Stéphane Laurent, CEO of Saffron, again, one of the companies that's looking at investing in India. From Thales, Emmanuel D. Rockefeller, I hope I've got your pronunciation right, the Vice President and Country Director. And from Airbus, a regular on CNBC TV 18, Pierre de Bussard, President and Managing Director. Thank you very much for joining us here on the show. Let me start by asking you, Jean-Marc, there has been a lot of momentum that's been built. France has agreed to collaborate with India on issues like the Smart City project and so on and so forth. You've got Prime Minister Modi meeting with the President. How much do you think the relationship has progressed in the past year or so?
It's the right moment to discuss that because we are on the eve of this important meeting, the first meeting between Prime Minister Modi and our new President, Emmanuel Macron. So important moment. And in the context of, I would say, to answer your question, the context of that excellent relationship between India and France. Politically, it's an excellent relationship. It has been, it is an excellent relationship. It's a relationship of trust between both countries because we are friends of the good and the more difficult moment, and that built a real relationship of trust. But also in the economic field, of course. France is very present in India. We have more than 400 French enterprises installed in this country. Important big companies. We have a big index for the Paris Stock Exchange, which is called the CAC 40. Yeah. And we have 38 of these 40 enterprises present in India, actually. But not only big firms, but only SMEs, but only startups. I hope we'll have the opportunity to talk about Creative France, and you saw it also, and this big country, big opportunity of fostering and launching a startup in India and elsewhere. And that's true, as you said, that France is very present in different sectors which are represented around this table. You quoted Smart City, big programs of Indian government. Smart City is a big program. And as you know, maybe France has a special relationship with three cities in India, with whom we signed a MOU last year. Right. Chandigarh, Nagpur, and Pondicherry. But we are also present in a lot of other countries, other states, sorry. We are going probably very soon to inaugurate with the Indian government the Kochi Metro. And the Kochi Metro is a strong, I would say, quoted bracket French project with more than 70 or 75% of all the equipment and tenders made and won by French firms. But also big investment also in Andhra Pradesh, in Tamil Nadu, in Gujarat, in many, many places. So energy, of course, defense, of course, traditionally, smart cities, hospitality, IT, of course.
What about retail? Because that's been an area of opportunity. We had Carrefour in India. They decided to exit India.
Exactly.
What is the sense that you get on whether retail is now going to be back on the table as an area of opportunity?
Yes. Oh, there is some room still for French presence in retail. We have, for instance, a big company which is Decathlon, which is very famous for sport equipment, which is very present. They are aiming to get 100 stores throughout India. But that's true that for multi-branch activities, well, Indian rules are still a bit restrictive just at the moment. But we heard that maybe a company like Carrefour is thinking about re-entry and other opportunity. But That's true that it's a more difficult sector than others because of more restrictive rules.
Speaking of FDI and speaking of rules that have been relaxed, the defense sector is one of the sectors where the government has opened up, in fact, allowing 100% foreign direct investment. Pierre, let me start by asking you about what the India opportunity now looks like as far as Airbus is concerned. You've got Indian partners here, like the Mahindras. We've just heard from the government, the much delayed strategic partnership policy. The 17-page document is now out. How confident do you feel about that?
Good question. I would say that on the commercial side of things, because Airbus, as you know, is very big commercially over here with the airplanes we've been selling and that are operating everywhere in the domestic market, things continue to look extremely bright. And the chances are that we'll see, with airlines expanding into international segments now, substantial new opportunities for ourselves. So we're very happy with
Vistara, for instance, is headed international, and they're a client.
They're a client, and they're looking at long-range airplanes as well, which is new to them, and which is an opportunity for us, of course, and I think for them, because they're going to be looking at worthwhile markets. On the defense side, things have been a bit more difficult for us.
Are you being polite when you say a bit more difficult?
Well,
is that an understatement?
It is an understatement, so I'll let you put what you want behind it. But what I'll say is there's movement. It's very clear. And the SP policy coming out the way it has been a surprise to us. It has come very fast. And in very little time, under a minister who's known to be a transition minister, actually, we've been surprised to see so much action. We're studying the fine print right now, because what we see in that SP policy is certainly an attention by the Indian government on making the defense sector attractive to private players of the Indian industry. Right. What we're still trying to see is how this is going to be attractive to the foreign OEMs. And there's a few questions in there that remain to be looked at. You were speaking of the relaxation of FDI.
Yes.
FDI has been relaxed last year under another chapter of DPP, of the Defense Procurement Policy. But under that new chapter, which is Chapter 7, there's actually a very clear limitation in any joint venture that would be the strategic partner to a maximum of 49%.
Okay.
It's clearly stated. And to be honest, for people like us who would be the initial providers of the technology, of the program management skills, supply chain management skills, and all these things that are required to help create the sustainable, long-term private champions that you would like locally, starting from a position of inferiority, if you will, with a maximum of 49% and no management control, creates a real question. Can we deliver what is expected of us with no control?
Okay. So at this point in time, you're saying that that is not adequate enough for you to excite you enough to make those kind of investments?
Let me put it differently. There's a lot of good things in there. I've concentrated on the one issue that actually really bothers us.
Okay. I'll come back to you in just a bit on some of the issues that you talked about, but let me get the view from Thales as well. Emmanuel, we just heard what Pierre had to say in terms of the opportunities as well as the challenges on doing business in the defense sector in India. You know, we've finally seen the Rafael project take off. Give me a sense of where things stand today and what your experience has been like and what more you would like to see.
Yes, you're right. I mean, it's clear that the fact that the Rafale has been signed last year is a tremendous change for many companies. Thales is one of them. Safran is one of also. Dassault, of course. For Thales, it's an enabler. It creates a lot of opportunities in terms of new business, new technologies, which will be, I would say, imported into India at the beginning. And then I would say we will use the offset commitment as an enabler to develop much more our industrial footprint in India. And as Prime Minister Modi sets in, make in India, of course, that's also the motto of Thales here, and potentially export from India.
Right.
Because this is really what we want.
So Stefan, let's wrap up the defense conversation before we move to other sectors. Take us through what Safran has planned for India, what your experience has been so far, and where you would actually like to see government intervention to enhance the experience.
Okay. And in India, to add to what Emmanuel was just saying, we actually came together with the Dassault in 53, so yes. we're here at the same time. Today we have 2,000 people in India, 8 companies, 1 training center, which is booming as well. It's very, we should talk about the training because it's a very important part too for India. And basically, if you have to remember just one figure, today Safran powers and/or equips 70% of anything that flies in India.
Okay.
So that's aircraft, helicopters, civil or military.
Wow.
So it can be the engine, can be the landing gear, can be the navigation system, and so on. And on the few things we do, I mean those things we do here, we power actually all HL helicopters.
Okay.
So starting 1962, co-production, co-development. We co-developed an engine just with HL, so for the Indian market, called the Shakti. We also, for example, the Vikas engine, used by Heathrow, it actually come for a cooperation with us in the 70s. So, it's all the Make in India things. I mean, we've been doing that.
So you're part of Make in India.
Yes, we are very much part of Make in India.
A very integral part of Make in India. Malcolm, you're going to have to top that. So I know it's unfair, but you're betting on a sector that the Indian government is betting on. It's a sunrise sector, the renewable energy space. All kinds of figures during the rounds. 6.25 lakh crore rupees is the kind of expected investment that the government has for the renewable energy space. How confident do you feel about the India story? What exactly are you going to be betting on?
Yeah, we're very confident on the India story. I think what's very important is that the government has set out clear ambitions and has very clear policies in some areas. When you look at the solar business, for example, they have an extremely clear and transparent process of auctioning solar opportunities, which we've taken part in. And their objective is enormous. 60 gigawatts of utility-scale solar over the next 5 years is a most incredible number.
The price is sustainable and viable, you feel?
I think the price, only time will tell.
That you bid on.
Only time will tell. We're confident of the deals that we're done. We're confident of delivering on the promises that we've made, which is extremely important for us. Let's see whether the subsequent deals, which have been done at much lower prices, are actually delivered. I think only time will tell on that. What we would like to see is that excellent, transparent process is transferred into other sectors in the same business. Our business, we're an energy multi-utility, we're an investor and an aggregator of energy and energy-related services. So we'd be interested in wind power too. There is an upcoming auction for a wind power in the next couple of months. But the timescale is a little compressed. It's a little bit more difficult. It's not quite as well developed as the solar system. We'd like to see a similar level of development. And then our other major sector for investment would be rooftop solar.
Okay.
And currently there's no real regulation which stimulates that.
So you're still awaiting clarity on policy in terms of rooftop solar. But just give me a ballpark sense of the kind of investments we can expect from NG into India over the next few years.
Yeah, we were quoted in the press just a couple of days ago as saying that we would bring $1 billion worth of investment over the next 5 years.
Okay.
That's certainly doable. What's important about that number that you should know is it's opportunity driven. If there are no opportunities, we can't invest. If the opportunities come and they are good quality, then we will invest and we will bring the money to invest here. It's difficult to put an upper limit on it. The limit is opportunities.
Okay. Evelyn, let's talk about the opportunities. I mean, you've been here in India. You were part of our forum here last year as well. What have you seen change? If I were to ask you about business confidence when it comes to French companies investing in India, how high is that today? And what are the niggling issues that they would like addressed?
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to come back on the first word you said, confidence. And it's very important that an investor who wants to invest in India has this confidence and this transparency in the way of doing business. I arrived in India more than 3 years, almost 3 years ago after Mr. Modi's election, and I must say that I'm very impressed in the acceleration on the structural reform efforts. It has been tremendous in all the sectors. we can speak also about important sector to leverage financing. By example, the insolvency and bankruptcy code, starting last year in May, which is very important. The new regulation in banking also to avoid NPA or to better address and restructure the distressed assets. Well, and now we will come to the GST, which is also
a big structural reform,
a big important reform. And then, in front of this reform, you can be a little bit disappointed because India has been ranked for 2017 130 on 190 countries.
On the ease of doing business.
On the ease of doing business index. And it's a bit disappointed. But at the same time, such big reforms are taking time. And in the short term, sometimes it's disruptive. If you speak about GST, everybody will tell you, well, we will have to see, to adapt, to invest. It will take some 6 months or something like that. But in the long term, you will gain in efficiency and so on. So I really think that at the end of the day, it will bring more confidence and more investor. And if you look at the FDI in 2016, $43 billion,
record highs, FDI record highs.
Plus 9%. So really, now India is in the bright spot on the global economy and will bring investment in India.
You know, Pierre, let me ask you that. As Evelyn rightly pointed out, FDI flows have been very strong into India. But unfortunately, not a large chunk of that money has come into the Make in India side of the business. Defense, for instance, hasn't really seen anything at all in terms of big ticket investments so far. In terms of the proposed partnerships that you're looking at in India, for instance, you know, the C-295 transport aircraft, how much clarity do you have on when we are likely to see all of that take off for you?
The when is the big question. Whether it will take off, I'm very sure it will take off. But it requires vision, faith, and patience to be able to go through defense contracts over here. So I think Evelyn is right. Structural reform is happening, that there is a will is very clear, that there are vested interests that are slowing things down is also a reality. And going through the process...
Corporate vested interests?
Well, vested interests of people, all kinds of vested interests. They are in many countries, of course, but it's true here too. And so the emergence of a private sector in the field of defense, of course, ruffles a few feathers of people who've been there before and won't be alone anymore. For instance, that's one example. There's people who see that processes get accelerated or should be made easier, and it affects the way they'll have to do their job. It's change management, if you will. So with all of this, no, I'm very confident it will happen. I think it will come. In the case of defense, it's very clear. If you want to have investment, you need to have contracts. And so until the contract comes, there won't be the investment. That's true for defense. If you look at the commercial side of things, because we do a lot over here, we tend to buy what we put into our airplanes, but we've been investing in terms of, we've been buying a lot from India, for instance. We're buying over $500 million a year, actually much more than that now, in dollars I'm speaking. And that flies into our airplanes all the same.
So the sourcing has gone up, and it's at about $500 million a year for you at Airbus from India.
And it means a lot of support to the suppliers that we have over here. It's very akin to investing our own money into plants. It's just that our model is to subcontract rather to do it than to do it ourselves. In defense, unfortunately, there will have to be contracts to see the investment coming in.
Emmanuel, you know, and I think Stefan talked about this. As you go about setting up your supply chain here in India, there is, of course, going to be the issue of technology. There's also going to be the issue of skilling people. And I know that this is an area of opportunity for the government, and this is an area of collaboration and partnership. How are you dealing with setting up the ecosystem, so to speak, in India as you move forward?
First of all, there is an enormous amount of talented engineers here. It's probably the country which is educating the most number of engineers in India. And as a matter of fact, the talents of Indian engineers in clouds technology or artificial intelligence technology is extremely well known. And it's a fact recently. We have announced the buy-in of Gravis in the US, but actually Gravius is a 250 people company. And 140 of those people are actually in India.
Okay.
It has been created by an Indian entrepreneur. And those people will integrate, so the 140 people will integrate Thales India during August or September when we will close.
So you go from 300 people to,
It's already some new talents which are coming into Thales. Another factor that we are encouraging is a link with universities. Already we have signed 3 MOUs over the last years to create fellowships, doctorate fellowships in France, supported by Thales in France.
Okay.
The MOUs are planning for up to 4 fellows per year, which is quite numerous. And this year we'll sign another one, I think early July, something like that, in Chennai.
So Jean-Marc, what do French companies tell you about what perhaps is holding them back from making incremental investments into India? We've all talked about the ease of doing business and so on and so forth. Tax was a big issue when we last met here. What continue to be the concerns that they have about making investments into India? India
still, in France, has a reputation to be a complicated country. I cannot say that it's completely false, because sometimes that's true that we have to help, and sometimes you have to go through different procedures and so on. But it's really improving. It's really improving, and what we say to our counterpart in France when we come back, when we make some shows in France, it's, well, India is now improving, is changing a lot. And the good news have been quoted, actually, 90% of investment automatic route, well, GST, which is a big issue, actually, big issue. And that probably will change also the business model of some companies, because you had some companies wanted to invest directly in some states, and now with the GST, probably there will be some stores in somewhere in India with some distribution throughout the country, because it will be much easier to. So business efficiencies is what you're hoping to capitalize on post the rollout of the GST on the first. It's improving. But what will it take? France is currently the 9th biggest investor into India. Malcolm, what do you think it will take to improve on that number?
Yeah, I think what would be key from my perspective is a streamlining of the regulatory system. I'd like to focus on one very specific little example. We're all business leader, international expats here. I have my career, 20-year expats. I've lived maybe in 9, 10 countries around the world. And nowhere has it been more difficult to complete the visa process than it is here. Really? Literally, you have to register yourself at the FRRO, the Foreign Resident Registration Office. I've been there 4 times. I spend half a day each time. There's journey times to and fro. You sit in a queue outside. It's really a labyrinthine system, and it needs streamlining. And I know that system is replicated elsewhere, permitting for new projects. All of those acquiring land issues. Sure. All of those issues need addressing in order to streamline business. Let me end then by getting wrap-up comments from each of you. And Pierre, let me start by asking you, as we look at the world today, there's all kinds of uncertainty. There may be changes that we see as far as political or geopolitical regimes are concerned. How does India stack up in the global order for somebody like Airbus today?
I think India is very interesting. It's a country that is growing quite clearly. It's a country that has a tremendous market for us, and one that is not yet mature, so it's got plenty of way to go. It's one where there's that wonderful combination of very good resources, and we talked about the talent pool that's over here, with the engineering centers that we have over here and what they do for us, the markets that we have. I spoke about defense, I spoke about our airplanes, but what we can do in training and all kinds of services that we can provide next to that. India is very high.
Emmanuel, I'm going to ask you for your wrap-up comments.
Well, I mean, it's very clear for Thales. India is one of the 3 countries among of the countries in the world where we want to develop. 3 priority countries. The 3 are US, China, and India. So it's clear. Now we talked a lot about defense, talents, but we didn't talk about transport actually.
Yes.
We did talk about air transportation, but rail transportation and metro.
Metro, which Jean-Marc talked about. Yeah, the Kochi Metro.
Extremely important. Maybe you don't know, but Thales has been extremely invested into metro. We Bangalore, Mumbai, Delhi, and the last one we opened the Gorgon ticketing system in Delhi just last week with some delays. But it was not obviously due to Thales. It was just a package. But we've been investing a lot in metro.
Transportation, yes.
And now our ambition is also to be part of the railway transformation here in India, where the government is putting a lot of investment. Just to give you a figure, from the beginning of this year, I think 12 requests for proposal have been issued for 2,000 kilometers of modernization and protection of, I think, 1,000 locomotives.
That's the view coming in from Thales. Stefan.
Well, as a wrap-up, they were mentioning the place of India in the. It's obviously, but it's useless to say that it's a strategic place for us, country. Today, if you say so, the 2 biggest countries for France, for Safran as a customers is France and US. Then you have Mexico and Morocco as a industrial base, basically. And the 5th biggest one in terms of employees is clearly India. So clearly the first one in Asia. Today, mainly I was mentioning for India, but also some export. I didn't mention, no, we export many things from here already. And basically, when you look at the growth in the civil market, plus 25% last year, against 80% last month.
Double-digit, yes.
That's obviously it's there for us. On the defense side, besides the fighters, we also, as mentioned, the helicopters, the submarines, the ships, tanks, and so on. So we are positioned on all those markets, so the growth is there.
Evelyn.
Well, I am less concrete. Well, because we are producing not money but services. So I will re-insist on 3 areas, our clients. So of course, Indian clients are very important for us, are key in India and outside India. On the contrary, MNCs, European or from the world, we are helping them also assessing the Indian market, which seems complicated sometimes. Second, our workforce, our employees, and really we are counting on Indian people. India is important for us. And I would like to quote a newspaper, German newspaper 2 days ago, telling why Mr. Modi could not replace Mr. Trump in the G7.
But Malcolm, your thoughts on India as we end this conversation.
It's impossible to ignore, in a nutshell. It's such a large market, so many people, so much economic growth, and such an ambitious government with targets for energy which align perfectly with ENGIE's own targets, which is to decarbonise, as in to reduce carbon emissions for environmental. So it's impossible to ignore this market. It's, relatively speaking, quite small for us at the moment in terms of our presence here, but watch us grow.
Watch us grow, and we will be watching, and maybe you'll come back with much more of a French accent the next time that we have you back on this show.
I'll try and develop one.
Jean-Marc, maybe a Hindi closing statement from you then.
Oh. Yes, no, I wouldn't dare, but actually just to wrap up and to say a few words, in 3 words, I'm very happy to say that France invests in India more and more, that's true. France makes in India, and Just to take a very famous example, the Queen model of Renault, which is produced in Chennai, is 98% made in India and begins being exported from India to other countries. And to take another example, when Alstom is building just now, is building a plant in Bihar to produce in India 800 locomotives of the Indian railways. You know, that good example of the makes in India.
Yes.
But third, France innovates also in India. I'm very impressed by the number of R&D centers belonging to French firms throughout India. And Indian engineers, whose quality is well known throughout the world, of course, are creating solutions which are useful for the whole world and not only for India, actually. That's very impressive.
So make in India, export from India, innovate in India, and may you all prosper in India. Thank you very much for joining us here on this special conversation. Appreciate your time, and we wish you individually and collectively the very best. Thanks very much for joining us here. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this CNBC TV 18 special, the Indo-French Dialogue. We'll see you again next year from all of us here. For now, goodbye. Many thanks for watching.